Hello there and welcome to Recon Paint Gaming. I'm Patrick. Today is a very special episode. We are going to be repainting a K-Wing from the X-Wing Miniatures game. We're going to be applying the Esege paint scheme. So if you do know Esege, he flies the K-Wing and comes with a really cool ability to where while another ship is attacking or defending, he can spend the focus from Esege as if it is their own. So I've always loved that ship. I actually been flying it locally in my league, and I've grown to love the paint job. So we're going to show you how you can apply it to your ship if you're also an Esege fan or even a K-Wing fan. And there's going to be a special surprise at the end of the video as well. So hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so we are not just going to actually use a generic orange. We're going to be mixing a lot of paints together to try and get as close as possible to the actual color that is on the card itself. So we actually are using the Model Air Red. We are using a German orange from Model Color. We're using a Model Air Yellow, which is the medium yellow, and then we're even using a brown as well. So we're mixing actual paints that are meant for an airbrush, and then we're adding even some paints that are not in the airbrush, or they're not thin enough to really go through properly. But putting down the base coat, you will notice I did not prime this model. I'm going directly over the actual paint job. I was asked about this locally by one of our players recently of, since you do so many repaints, what do you suggest? And I told him it all depends on what you want to put as your base coat. If you think your base coat is either bright enough or dark enough to cover all of the markings that were on the ship originally, then I would highly suggest just painting it over like I am. You can do this with a brush. You will have, of course, issues with either brush strokes, pooling, and other issues, but we're going directly over it. So that way, there's no question that this is going to be the color of our ship. I didn't use any sort of tape. I didn't cover anything. We're going over the entire model with this color, basically because of the fact of I can easily paint over it with a brush later. This is what's covering the ship mostly anyways when it comes to the actual photo. So a lot of the top is that orange, and some of the underneath is also that orange as well. And when you get later on in the painting schemes, you'll also want to think things through, because I knew that the model itself is not only this orange, but also gray. And gray is a lot easier to paint over the orange. I don't have to use as many coats, but if I were to try and paint the orange over the gray, I knew that I would have issues, because when you're mixing your own orange to try and match a color, usually the paint is thinner or you're getting different consistencies, and it's just better to do it. Now, you will notice that I am painting this one K-Wing, but you will also see, as we fast forward here, there is a second K-Wing that I am painting. And that is because we painted two of these K-Wings with the Esege colors. So that way we can keep one for ourselves. And I have no cause or reason to keep a second one. So if you watch all the way to the end, you'll find out what I'm going to do with that second one, which is something that we're going to start doing as long as it's cost effective, and we're going to try and give this thing away. So I'm super excited to do this because I've amassed a huge collection from people donating stuff. I've been finding random people to just send ships to for not only tournaments but personal use, and just amassing collections for other players around the world. So we are almost done with the base coat. I did do a few coats, at least 3, to make sure the reds were covered up, and we're now going to see the fruits of my labor. So here is one of the K-Wings painted and the other one with just the base coat. The one that's already painted is my personal one, and that's what we're going to be going off. We, of course, have the art as well, but it's always great to paint one for yourself, and then when you're ready to give one away, paint it for someone else. That way you know where you made your mistakes, where you can make your adjustments and fix it. So here is the one that we're going to be painted. It's just orange, and I'm going to show you all of what I did to the first one. Okay, so we have first sorted out the gray colors. We're doing 1 part of a light gray, which is model air, and then a 1 part of white, which is actually a 2-to-3 ratio, 2 parts light gray, 1 part white. And this is going to be the first part, or at least the design or decals that are going to be on the top. And then also most of the bottom or undercarriage is also going to be painted that gray, and we'll cover each part of what we did. So when you are trying to paint a design or follow some sort of pattern, you can use tape to mark it off, or you can freehand it like I'm about to. A lot of times when I do things like this, the brush tip does not have a huge chunk of paint on it. It's usually just the front part of the brush. I don't want to get the whole thing drenched in paint because that's going to glob on the model. I really want it to look like it's flush or no marks or bristle marks on the model. And one thing I do highly recommend is do a few practice strokes before you touch the brush to the model. That way you can get your rhythm, you know exactly what shape you're going to do, and steadies your hand before you apply it. So always work with smooth strokes and then apply a little bit. Even if it's not perfect, you can always go back, rinse off your brush, add a little bit of water, and try to erase what you just painted. Because if you put on a lot of paint, then it's that much harder to get it off. You can, of course, try to wipe it with a finger, but that might harm your layer that's beneath it. So as long as your base coat is dry, which this model dried for several days, and then I started painting this layer on it now. Don't be afraid to take breaks, let layers dry, and always try to do a nice practice brush stroke before you start applying details. You can even try going over it with some sort of pencil to try and mark a line, and then just cover it with the paint. You may have also just seen that I painted the back vents white instead of just leaving them the generic orange. That's because I'm going to go over them later with a plasma bolt speed paint, and that if I left it orange, it would have affected the original color, and I really wanted the plasma bolt, which you'll see later, or you can actually see on the example ship, matched it almost perfectly just with the generic plasma bolt color. So we are still fast forwarding through the painting of the ship on the top and the bottom. You don't get to see under the ship, as just the photo shows kind of a front side view, but you can tell from the actual picture itself that there is a part on the wing to where it has that beautiful orange and then transitions back to that gray. So I just assumed or finished in my own design that the entire bottom of the ship is going to be gray, and there are going to be only certain parts such as the engines, part of the undercarriage, which is in that front middle right before the head is attached, and some of the missiles or torpedo bays that are going to retain or keep that orange. And also, as well as the top part of the underwing is going to stay orange as well. And this is just, a designer's choice. You can, share what you may have chosen as an undercarriage color. You may have kept it orange and then kind of replicated that design that's on top underneath. But me, I just kept it that nice gray because, that's mostly what you're going to see when it's on the table. And a lot of people, when they do actually paint physical tanks or airplanes, a lot of times the undercarriage is just a generic color, because if you are looking from the ground up, you really don't want to see a bright orange ship. You'd rather just it mend or blend in with the clouds. And we are going to fast forward just a little bit because it does take a little bit of time to paint all of those little crevices and make sure that our lines are straight and that we don't overpaint some of the orange that we're keeping on the bottom. And now this is a great time to go over some of the sections that you've already done if you haven't, because about an hour has passed. And if you notice that some of the orange is still poking through, if there's a line that's just not straight, or you need to thicken something or thin it, you want to go back over with that color, especially before it dries out and you have to make more. So this is that next part that I was talking about, to where I came in with that plasma bolt with speed paint, because I do want to do multiple coats of this. I didn't want to over saturate the brush and then have all these pools in each of those little crevices of those vents. So what I did is I did a light coat to start. I'm going to do another second coat later to try and deepen those beautiful teals, or blue green, if you would. For this next part, we are going to have to paint the tips of all the missiles and torpedo bays, as well as the front part of the engines, because they are kind of a muddy or kind of brownish yellow. And we already prepared all of those because of the gray paint. So we painted the tips already with that same gray that we started with, because it is kind of a lighter gray. It's not a primer gray that we use. And we're using the yellow ochre from Model Air. It's kind of a muddier or mustard yellow. And we quickly just paint the tips of those, and also the engine front parts that have already been primed as well. And it came out absolutely perfect. That's the exact yellow that I was looking forward to. It may take a few coats because it is a little bit more watered down. You may have more luck with the yellows that you use, but it is basically a very small part of the model. There's, many torpedoes and stuff on it, but we were quickly able to get these on and match it to the photo almost perfectly. So we were very happy with how this came out. We now fast forward back to those vents. So now that the first layer is dried, we're going to apply a second layer, and you can see right there it darkens up so much more. And then we're also going to go back underneath, because now that that paint's dry, we're just going to make sure that it comes out or covers any parts that may still be orange. We now move on to the bow of the ship, to where it's my favorite part, because I love using World of Tanks paints, and this is USSR World of Tanks paints, the multitude of greens and grays that I have. So I'm just very excited that I get to use it for this actual ship. The paint scheme, when I applied it the first time, I used a USA tank green, and it didn't come out exactly as the photo shown, or it didn't match perfectly. Plus, it's a very thick paint. So on this second time around, I used the USSR green tank paint, and also added a few drops of water to my palette. That way it was a little bit more watered down. It was a lot easier to handle, and it came out a lot flatter with the actual model, rather than very raised and harder to smooth out, and a lot less brush strokes. So here I am painting the pattern that was matched to the photo. I definitely learned a lot from painting this the first time, and was a lot less nervous freehanding it. Again, you are more than welcome to use tape if you feel uncomfortable trying to trace or draw a pattern. This one, I made a little space in that front V right there. I was a lot straighter with my lines, and already knew my plan on painting the side of the bow, because in the photo it does look like there are side windows added to it. I'm not sure. There's just kind of like two dots of blue that look like it's reflecting. So there's no windows on the model, but I ended up painting them there. You'll see later. We are now on to the windows. Since our base colors are down all over the ship, I mean, this is mostly done. Now it's just adding that extra flare, and I'm using magic blue, to where we're going to go in and kind of oversaturate the brush, and we're going to dip them in ever so slightly. Now, this is a speed paint, so it is very watered down already. I don't believe I added any further water to it. This way, I can just touch certain areas like these windows. There is enough of a bevel, or they're deep enough to where the paint is just going to flow into that spot. I don't have to overwork it, use a particularly small brush, make the blue that I want, and try not to go outside the edges. This makes line painting so much easier on certain parts like windows. So I highly recommend, if you are looking for ways to paint in certain spots that are really irritating, X-wing ships are particularly great for this because there's so many windows. As you can see, there's 2 on the top, 2 on the side, and even on the ball turret there was 4 windows there, and underneath on the ball turret there is another, looks like 10 windows that are really small, and depending on how well the model was made, you might not be able to get paint in there very easily. So I highly recommend using those for windows just to start with a color and allow that to sit. So you're going to see me go back to the other decals on the ship just to go over again with another coat to make sure that the gray is completely covered and has any other marks, because it's not a flat surface and this is a very flat paint. You really want to make sure that you add multiple layers. That way it doesn't look like when you go over a raised section that it's making the lines not look straight or uneven. So this is where a lot of the finesse will come in, the finer details. If you look at the photo, there are some, I guess, speed lines or just kind of extra details on that top mid-engine. There are some lines that kind of zigzag. There's some straight ones. And so I made 4 lines up top. We've already also painted the engines on the back with that gray, because again, that's how it has it in the photo. So this, we've mixed some more of the same gray, 2 parts of the light gray with the white, and we also watered it down ever so slightly. That way it will go on smooth. It's not going to dry too quickly, because you'll notice I'm using a very small bristle on that brush. And what can happen is if the paint is too thick, you'll paint it, it might go on too thick, and then halfway towards where you're trying to finish, you run out of paint, or it's too globbed on to where it will make a big fat line and then it'll start to go skinny and then it will no longer have any paint on it. So always understand that a smaller bristle brush can't hold as much paint as a larger one. You can use a larger brush that is much thicker with a fine tip, but in this case I really wanted a fine line, so I watered it down just a smidge and then painted the lines ever so carefully. Again, doing some practice lines first and then going in one fell swoop instead of, trying to make little swipes, which can make lines look uneven or look very jagged. We're going to now fast forward to painting those side windows that we were talking about in the photo. So we're going to use our favorite Acryl Pro Turquoise, which is a much brighter blue. It's going to be our very base coat or the primary color of the window because we really want it to look like a window. And I know we use the magic blue, but again, that's more for those, enclosed areas. On kind of flat open surfaces, we really do want to use some sort of thicker paint. And I chose this one because, again, it is a very great color, and it's going to start off as looking like a window. We can add some highlights later, and it's also going to make it easier just to paint a single coat rather than having to go over and over with a thinner blue, because the acrylics are a much thicker paint, and was able to get that color right out of the gate rather than multiple coats on that top of that green, which is very difficult to cover up. We're now going to go into the engine glow. This is a technique that I've kind of developed if you're really not into the whole, blending paints and overcomplicating a simple technique or a simple way to do it. You basically want to paint the engines on the inside white to start. And if you have a lighter blue, you can mix colors. and make it to where it's kind of like the acro blue that I'm applying here. You first apply the white paint, and then while it's still wet, go in with the blue paint and kind of mix it around. Just be careful not to touch the white that's in the dead center of the engine itself. You kind of want to leave that white in there. That way it looks like the engine is actually glowing, and the blue is kind of the after effect that comes out of the engine. So that's the simplest way that I've developed an engine glow. I mean, I can show you other models that I've done to where it's a lot more complicated, but I think this is the best method for something quick, easy. It looks great on the table. Even if you look at it real close, it does look like the engines are actually on rather than just leaving them a blank or default color. We're now going to add a nice little touch to the highlights or decals that we have here. We're actually going to switch to the US paint from World of Tanks paints. And what we're doing is now going over the edges of some of the decals or markings on the top, because they do show that in the photo that some of the markings do have kind of a green outline that somewhat match what the rest of the ship is. So as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, we used a skinny brush. For this, I'm using a much thicker brush with a very fine tip. That's because I want more paint to be loaded into the brush, because I'm going to be making much longer and smoother strokes. So we're switching to this brush. We're just going along the edges. This will also allow us to fix some of the unsmooth edges from that gray. And we're just going to do some of the outlines, such as the big ones in the middle are going to have a complete outline, while the longer ones are going to just have a green line painted on the inside of the markings, as we see in the ship, or at least that's what it indicates in the photo. And again, I've already painted the first ship there. I really loved how it came out, so I'm continuing on this ship. You can see I'm painting the green on the inside of the skinnier markings, but on those much larger ones, I'm just going around, sharpening those edges and coating them with that green paint. We're now going to cut to a small part of the ship to where we're just going to outline those windows with black, and we're using the black model air paint because it is very thin. It'll allow me to make small lines, and that's because, again, from the photo, that's what it kind of looks like. It's outlined in black, so we just make small circles, nice and easy. This will give them that depth that you see, kind of make them pop out just a little bit when you do look at them, rather than looking just like kind of a strange blue blob on the side. So that's basically what we're trying to do with that black outline. Now for my favorite part, this is where it's really going to pay off when we use that speed paint, because the windows are very highlighted. We're just going to do a dry brush technique, except we're not going to swipe. We're just going to try to poke and try and make the middles very white or a little bit lighter blue. That way it kind of gives that glare look that you get when, you know, the sky and the sun and the clouds are hitting the windows. The small dry brush that I'm using, you can use a regular brush if you'd like. You might damage the tips if you do. This is particularly a small dry brush. It allows me to really get into those small spaces. The gray that we're going over allows us to use the white, because now it's going to add kind of a edge highlight to that non-window section, kind of the edging that holds in the windows. And simple touch up, it kind of over exaggerates because that's what the photo's doing. So it's not too much technique to where I have to go back in with the white and, you know, kind of overcompensate and make it really look like a real window. I'm just trying to replicate what's in the photo, and I think it came out exactly how I wanted it to. All right. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I tried to include as many tips as I could on how I painted this and how you could possibly replicate it at home. So the big surprise is, of course, that I'm going to be giving away this ship, the one that you just saw painted in this stream. Because again, I have so many ships that I have at my disposal that I'm going to try to not only give them away to people randomly, I'm going to paint some of them with the scheme of a ship and give it away. And we'll figure out shipping if you'd like to cover the cost. And of course, we do ship to outside the United States. But if you'd like a chance to win the ship, you can email me at reconspecialisttv@gmail.com. You have to include your actual name and your YouTube name so that I can verify that you did like and subscribe. Even if you leave a comment below, that would be great too, because that would verify your name even faster. And then I will draw a random name within a few days of posting this video, and then I'll reach out to you and let you know that you've won the ship. So if there's any other ships that you would like to see painted, please leave a comment below, because I've already started painting some already. I believe we had Sunny Bounder, and I even painted one of the H6 bombers with a paint scheme, which I'd love to replicate on camera. So please don't hesitate, because even if I do paint it and you don't win or have a chance to win the ship, you can at least watch the video and replicate it at home. That way we can keep this community growing and interest fresh. So that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys liked and enjoy it. If you don't even want a chance to enter, you can always it's free, and you can always click subscribe to let you know, or let me know, that this is the sort of content you'd like to see. So with that, have a great day, and of course, have fun.